topic of the panel is the AppSec AI revolution. And on the one hand, it seems like a very stereotypical concept, a very sort of, AI is revolutionizing everything, AI is the future, whatever else. But certainly as someone who has been involved in software and software security over the last year, it has been a wild, wild year. I mean, it's hard to believe that Claude Code, for example, was released less than a year ago, when it seems to be absolutely everywhere right now. Everyone seems to be using it. Everyone seems to be adding add-ons to it. And, less than a year old. We've seen things changing week by week, month by month, new models being released, new mechanisms to use it, people spinning up brand new things just by letting the code generator run over and over and over. And certainly from a software security perspective, it raises a lot of questions. Certainly questions I've asked myself over the last year. And I've tried to sort of bring some of those questions together for our panel today. So before we get into that, I would ask our panel members to maybe briefly introduce themselves, just in case anyone's not familiar, and then we'll get into the questions. So,
ladies first.
Go for it.
You can hear me?
You
can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Oana Ashkenazi. Today, the managing partner of the Kmehin Venture Capital, the Israeli CISO's VC, and a former SVP Security Engineering and CISO of JFrog, and prior to that, Playtika, and product manager for 10 plus years before that. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all very much for being here tonight. I want to give a shout out to Team OWASP, and thank you again to all of the Akamites in the room that stayed tonight to be a part of this, as well as our partners from Apiiro. I do also want to say very much a thank you to everybody in the room for your commitment to stay in the fight and to work these complex problems. What you do every day matters. It matters now more than ever because of threats, and the speed of those threats are getting faster and faster. And tonight's topics are really important in regards to how we're going to show up and how we're going to address things. My name is Sean Lyons. I am super humbled and proud to lead an amazing group of warriors in our infrastructure and application security business.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cannot compete with that.
Thank God I was before.
I'm Idan, I'm the CEO at Apiiro. That's it. Hi everybody, my name is Thomas. I'm the former CEO of GitHub until last August. I was at the helm at GitHub for about 4 years. I'm originally from Germany, as you can hear. Usually people figure that out when I just say hello in the ski gondola. I don't know how. I work with Apiiro, that's why I'm here this week. I'm also working on a new startup, and I love to say I'm just a software developer, and I love coding, and I never loved it more than now. And you invented GitHub Copilot, which is number one in the AI coding agents.
No, you said more about me than you said about yourself.
I'm responsible for many of the things we're going to discuss tonight. Okay. Thanks so much, folks. So the first question I wanted to talk about was, I guess, around application security risk. Security is a big field. As a CISO, there is a lot to worry about. There's a lot to think about. Application security is, we're here to talk about one aspect of that. So I guess the question I wanted to raise now is, where does application security rank compared to all the other risks that maybe are keeping a CISO up at night? And has that changed over the last year, given what we've seen with both AI in use in development and AI in products themselves? So where does it rank, and how has that changed? All right, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I can talk about the complexity of being a CISO in the era of AI developing. everything runs so fast. Developing becomes something that like every engineer, every software engineer is now a team lead of agents, right? Is not practically almost not writing code, but running agents that develop code. So everything becomes so fast, and as a security gatekeepers, we really, truly rank the application security and the supply chain in general as almost one of the three major risks in cybersecurity, because supply chain attack can be something that involves companies and nations, and that's become something super, super urgent for all of us. So it's evolving, and I can share that we spend a lot of time and effort. Thank you. I can share that we spend a lot of time and effort in order to make sure that the supply chain security will be so strong with gatekeepers, not blockers. So part of that was adopt the best solutions out there in the market and make sure that every vulnerability will be fixed.
Is that something that's changed over the last year?
Yes, definitely, because it's been accelerated. One of the KPIs that we thought of is just block releases with critical vulnerabilities. That was a KR. That was something that we would truly try to block. You cannot do that anymore. You just need to narrow it down to something that is scale. And that was a huge challenge, and we saw that it's become almost impossible. So we truly invest in startups and a lot of self-development just to make sure that we'll be able to keep the pace.
Okay.
I think maybe before even talking about risks, I think that when an agent writes the code now and introduce new APIs, new dependencies, new data models, new technologies, and expand the attack surface, we don't have the fundamental thing, which is inventory, to know what these agent introduces. I'm saying you are developing so fast and you do not read or review. You have like a YOLO mode. No one reviews the pull request and they want to approve it and move fast to production. So even before talking about vulnerabilities, understanding the attack surface and the amount of code resources that are getting into your code is a huge problem. Like if you compare it to cloud security, this was the first thing that they've done, building an inventory of everything that you have in the cloud, understand the cloud architecture. No one is doing it in application security, and this is the challenge. The second thing is that when the velocity is growing 4x from the last research that we did with Fortune 20, the amount of vulnerabilities are growing so fast that you cannot ask your developers. It breaks the physics of AppSec. You cannot ask the developers to deal with more and more fixing vulnerabilities in their every sprint. So we need a fundamental shift from detection, prioritization to preventing it.
I agree.
Do you want all of us to answer? We'll be here all night.
I mean, Akamai is obviously a large organization. Akamai's got a lot of things to worry about at the same time, but this is now suddenly become a quite huge and emergent threat. So it'd be interesting to know if things have changed over the last year and how you're seeing that manifest within the organization's priorities, within the organization's budgeting, within the way that the organization relates to application security. So
I would say absolutely. I'll use an American term, which is we are living in the wild, wild west. So what has changed is the fact that we have a rise, just like we all experience with shadow IT, to the point that Adon made. Number one, what is the visibility of the actual use of these agents within the organization? And then number two, how are you going to identify drift? And more importantly, where we need to get to is how are you going to take proactive actions to stop that? So that's the internal aspect. What our customers are also worried about is it takes 42 seconds to successfully launch an LLM from a DDoS perspective. according to industry analysts, breaches now go hidden for 80 days based on some of the tooling that's available. So think about that. There could be things that are growing and exfiltrating data within your environment that you thought was a known good, which is a known bad, and now it's taking you 80 days to uncover that. So I believe that discovery and inventory is absolutely critical, but observing what's happening and identifying that drift, and then proactively, as quick as we can, to mitigate those risks is important. Why? SLAs used to be okay at 15 minutes, 10 minutes. Now SLAs are at the speed of a prompt, milliseconds.
I think the counterpoint is, everybody talks about the rising risk in AI writing all this code. Also, it has never been easier to find out about OWASP. It's never been easier to actually put the OWASP top 10. I think I first discovered that like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that, to actually apply that to your source code, right? You can just ask your favorite agent in the sidebar to figure out why this code has a SQL injection. I think for me, one of the eye-opening moments was a few years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Not only could it find the SQL injection, it could actually explain the SQL injection to you or your coworkers. And then you could even ask it to show me how an attacker would exploit the SQL injection. And you could never do that before without AI, right? You could read all the documentation, you could see some sample code, but it wouldn't show you the relevance of that for your source code. And of course, then you can also say, fix it for me. I'm pretty sure actually you can probably just tell Cloud Code to look for OWASP top 10 findings in your source code and try to fix them or show you how to fix them. So I think both of these things are true. It's always the cat and mouse game. Of course, all the attackers have AI available, but we also have these AI tools available to us, and we just need to use them to make our source code more secure.
I would add to that, not even a step before, there are probably application security architect here. Our AI narrowed the time from idea to developing so fast. So think about threat modeling that we used to do for major features or risky features that really are related to authentication and authorization, things that we used to review and think about them and negotiate and talk about them. You don't have time to do that. Tomorrow morning it will be developed already, so you need to move very fast. And I totally agree with Dan about a fundamental change. We need to be there with agents that will accelerate our ability to review it as well.
Yeah, and I think we're certainly going to explore that a second in the next question. But I guess, I think the next question we're going to talk sort of more about how we basically use AI to try and accelerate what we're doing, potentially building things in-house. And before we get to that, I guess that's, are we seeing a situation where maybe in previous years people were trying to sort of get budget for AppSec investment or AppSec headcount to actually sort of sit and do sophisticated things, but they were struggling? Are we seeing that, having just had the past year of massive acceleration in code generation, whatever else, are we seeing that budget is now more forthcoming? Are we seeing that AppSec is now sort of being pushed higher up in the priorities, at the business level? I think there's always this discussion within AppSec, we're constantly fighting against all the other priorities. Okay, we need to get new features out, or we need to comply with this regulation, or whatever it is that we need to do. Are we seeing that now suddenly sort of the actual concept of checking for vulnerabilities and avoiding building vulnerabilities in the first place, is that now getting, is it now easier to pull budget out for that sort of thing? Do you think that that's something that they're seeing?
You're holding the budget now.
Go ahead. I would just say that it is a compelling event. It changed the priorities of the. Again, I'm talking from my point of view of working with CISOs in Fortune 2000 companies only, and they literally in the last year shifted budgets towards application security. And we see that it becomes, I'm 24 years in cyber, specifically AppSec. It always was a top-down process. I need to find out the relevant security engineer to convince him that we have the new shiny tool to solve a different problem. And it was very, very hard to get to the C-level to get the budgets. Now it's a top-down approach where the CTO, CIO, and CISO are going down to the team and saying, hey, how we are dealing with the expansion of the attack surface, how we are dealing with reviewing all this, how do we prevent these risks from reaching production. And we saw we said it publicly that we grew over 100% because of this demand, and we don't need to convince anyone that there is a problem, which was the case in ASPM, so I think the evolution of AppSec was AST, like scanning, detecting vulnerabilities, manage the risk, and now it will be preventing it.
I think if you ask about headcount, but you could also just look at budgets all up. Typically, AppSec sits in OpEx, operational expenses, as opposed to cost of goods sold, like running a service. And most of the tech companies, certainly in the United States, have not seen increases in their budgets. In fact, most budgets have stayed flat or slightly increased with cost of salary increases, bonuses, and whatnot. And within those budgets, we certainly see a shift in thinking. If you think about the cost of your employees or of your own cost at your company, obviously there's your salary and your bonus, and depending on what country you're living in, benefits and taxes and all that shit. And then there's tools in your office, and maybe you have a rental car or so. But what has been rising massively over the last year is your token cost, right? Or your GPU cost if you're a researcher, right? And that is very interesting because there's a direct function of your productivity tied to how much you're using an agent, right? And your budget as an engineering manager typically is flat over the year, or you're fighting for like a small increase, or you're fighting with somebody in your organization to get something from them. But it certainly isn't tied to how much your developers are shipping, right? And so you might actually get into a place nowadays that the more productive your developers are, the more token budget you need, but you don't have that because the budget is flat. Right, and so we're seeing this almost like inversion, similar to, not inversion, but like similar behavior as with our service. The more successful our service is, the higher our COGS are, and hopefully our revenue also grows, and then the CFO is fine that was growing. But on the operational side, that typically wasn't the case. More shipping didn't mean the CFO gave you more budget. If anything, they said, well, you got it along with the budget you have, so find more optimization. So I think overall, we don't see massive shift on the total, on the top line of these budgets, but we see a shift in allocation, and we need to start thinking about, okay, so how do I allocate my token budget? Like in my startup, I think we're spending sometimes between $50 and $100 per engineer per day on Anthropic tokens, right? If you do the math, 200 something workdays a year, that's $20,000 per engineer per year, and that's only going to go up, right? And so we got to find ways to optimize that in our planning processes, and then also, and you're alluding to this, is how much of that is used for code review, AppSec review, quality review, all those kind of things, was just generating more and more code and not being able to review all that, and basically that becoming the bottleneck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a very nice segue into our next question, which is around sort of internal AppSec teams. How are you seeing internal AppSec teams take advantage of AI assistants to actually build internal solutions? I think that maybe once upon a time, if you want to do AppSec teams sit like writing code manually to solve a particular problem, that was a way of solving a problem, but that was quite labor intensive, and often it would be easiest to try and bring something off the shelf. Nowadays, with AI code generation, suddenly doing that is a lot faster. I've done this myself multiple times over the last few months, precisely because it's now so much easier. So I guess the question is what sort of solutions, or in what situations have you seen internal AppSec teams taking advantage of this to build solutions to internal AppSec problems?
I can share how I see it. Basically, today it's AI or die. Okay, so you cannot think about should I adopt it as an AppSec. You have to do that. You have to. You don't have other choices. So that's the reality. The fact is that we truly appreciate great product, great solutions, and prefer to buy versus develop. We are not developing because it's cool and it's easy, just because we need to give context. We need to enrich the solutions that exist with our own context to make things much more efficient. For example, a good example for that, maybe for the AppSec teams and the penetration testers here, is around find the owners. Like, oh, I found a vulnerability, but I know a little bit about the service and the API, but who is the owner? Where should I go to and reach out a person that will fix it as fast as we can, especially when things are changing so much, so fast in Agile. So thinking about use of AI, the advantage of that, this is urgent. It's something that we have to do. Myself, I cannot, if someone will take like the agent out of me today, I cannot even think of writing emails anymore or answering or writing my bio for that meetup or anything else, thinking about PR that I need to release without AI, without a double check. But it's not replacing, but it's just extending my ability to do much more things, much faster. We need to invest in that, put our knowledge, and train the agents to do that fast. So this is that's my take. AI or die.
What I would say is that there were a bunch of non-believers 9 months ago, 12 months ago, in regards to what the feature set and functionality is. Everybody's a believer now. So because everybody's a believer now, there is this groundswell of how can I leverage this tool to actually make things faster, to be more creative, to get to the end result. And to Thomas's point, I believe what we're seeing and going to continue to see is, okay, you're running your business. Here's your budget. I could go hire 10 interns and assign those 10 interns to my lead development teams or my engineering teams. Or I could spend $20,000 a year and I could leverage Claude and I could use a very sophisticated person who has an understanding, can really drive that Claude instance for higher production and outcomes. So I think that the paradigm shift is this is going to continue to accelerate each generation and get better and better. And obviously we have to pay attention to the costing models as they shift. But I do believe this will be augmentation of very sophisticated drivers until we get to agentic.
Yeah, you just made an implicit statement that interns are going to replace with Claude. I actually think that's the wrong assumption. Because what we are going to actually see is the rise of the junior developer, because similar to different technology changes in the past, what's going to happen is that generation of young folks that are growing up now, I have 2 boys, 13 and 11, they're using more AI than probably the average person in Germany or the United States. And we're going to quickly see students coming out of universities that are so used to, leveraging the power of AI that they are going to not go through the same culture change that you all have to go through of adjusting your workflows that you're used to for the last 10, 15, 20 years. And as such, the interns actually, as always, as they have done in the past, bring this new energy, the new knowledge, the new how do I use AI for AppSec back into the company. So you're absolutely right. We're going to see scenarios where we are replacing kind of menial work with the help of AI, but those folks, the young folks, in the same way that they're so much more knowledgeable on filming a TikTok of their vacation, while I find it awful just kind of film here. But like, this is like the next generation always grows up with technology that we find unfamiliar, and as such they're so much more familiar with it and so much more powerful with it that we will have to embrace that and bring those young folks into the company and say, you're no longer a junior developer from 10 years ago, you're now at the skill set of a senior developer, and as such show us the way.
We'll go back to the original question for a second, and I would say
AI or
I would just say that we don't. You ask if AppSec teams are actually using AI to develop the tools. We don't see that across these large enterprises because of exactly what you said. There is a policy that you cannot develop any tool that you want, okay? And to develop a tool in a large enterprise, you need actually budget, process, go to, but what you said goes back to the fundamentals and inventory. You want to understand who is the owner of an API or open source dependency or a code module or a microservice.
Model.
I added a new Gen AI framework, or I developed an AI agent, or whatever. And this is, I think, what the AppSec today are doing with AI, trying to understand who are the owners, what is the software architecture. All the developers here that are actually using AI coding agents, they do not understand, not because they are not professionals, because the velocity of the changes doesn't allow you to understand the software architecture, and it changes so fast. So you need something, another agent, to understand that. And from our experience, this is what we see AppSec engineers are doing with AI, trying when they get into a threat model or into a security review or helping fix a vulnerability, they try to understand how the software architecture looks like instead of flying blind. Thank you. And he invented it today, but flying blind. We really feel that if you don't understand the software architecture, how you can give an advice to a developer that had a vulnerability without understanding and looking at the bigger picture? And I think this is a must to be good at our job as AppSec engineers.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the situational awareness thing is a big deal, especially larger organisations. It's a lot harder to figure out who owns this, who does this belong to. I think maybe it's possible the sort of DIY tools, the DIY code, maybe more in the smaller organisations where they are less organised. That's certainly been my experience in some of the less enterprisey, more sort of like startup plus organisations. That's where they start doing things slightly differently. And I'm going to use this as a segue into the next thing, because on the other hand, situational awareness works in a few different ways, and in principle, large enterprises have policies saying you can only do this, you can't do this, you have to do this in this certain way. But on the other hand, I think, again, AI and LLMs have very much sort of democratized what you can actually do. How can you actually do something yourself? Let's scope this within sort of traditional engineering teams for now, or traditional AppSec teams for now. But obviously, suddenly there's a lot more possibilities. People can just sign up for I don't know, their own personal Claude subscriptions, or they can download an LLM off the internet and suddenly integrate it as a new product feature. So okay, well now we're not getting billed for it because they downloaded the whole LLM and now they're just using it in the product. But it's still now got a product feature that's based on this LLM. So I guess the question becomes sort of what visibility and, dare I say, control. I mean. We can definitely hope visibility. Control is obviously a little bit trickier. What mechanisms are you seeing to sort of deal with this sudden rise? And I guess what sort of mechanisms are you seeing, and how effective are they? Or are you seeing situations where something new needs to be brought in to try and get control of this?
I think one way to look at this is that software engineering is so far ahead on AI because about a decade or so ago we invented DevOps and made our lives harder by introducing all these things that we don't want to do when we write coded 20 years ago, right? Like when I learned coding, I didn't write any unit tests. As to my memory, there wasn't even such a thing on a Commodore 64. Right? And like, raise your hand if your first project had any testing, any main branches, branch protection, CI/CD. None of that stuff was the fun of coding your first computer game, your first calculator or anything like that, right? But we introduced in software engineering all these processes, zero trust, branch protection, or security scanning, secret scanning, key vaults, all of these things to prepare us for AI, right? Because we don't actually trust our human developers either. We know they're making mistakes. That's why you have to ask somebody in your team to review your code and approve or maybe find some stuff. And we were discussing earlier, if you actually think about how code review works in your own teams, it's a reputation-based system. Like the principal engineer that you've been working with or for the last 10 years or that sits next to you get a much more linear code review where you're like, Idan wrote all this, looks cool, looks good to me, merge it. While the junior engineer that just joined the team gets like the nitpicking on every single line of code, right? That there's a space missing here and a semicolon there and so on, right? And that has nothing to do with actually the risk of introducing a bug. It has all to do with you trust one of these engineers more than the others. Right, in AI levels that playing field because we have to introduce the same code review processes, the same secret scanning processes, code scanning, ASTs and whatever acronym you have. We have to apply all of these to AI generated code. And if anything, if your CI/CD run fails, let's not merge that code whether that comes from a human or from AI. And I think that is what makes AI so successful in software engineering, if you have actually all these things in place. Now, there's lots of organizations that don't. Whenever I've been on the road with GitHub and I met with banks and finance institutions and local governments, they're running COBOL on mainframes. And leaving aside that COBOL is a 50-year-old language from the Eisenhower era, 1958 or something like that, guess what? COBOL also has no unit tests, and it has no CI/CD, and it often is not on GitHub, and all these kind of things, right? And so the problem that we have as an industry, we're living on this insane spectrum of technology that is out there. COBOL and mainframes, and Windows 95 terminals, and PHP and Perl, and all the stuff that was written in the 90s when the internet was hot, all the way to now Python and Go and Rust and the modern languages. And almost no organization out there that is more than a year old doesn't have legacy code, right? Like I think my favorite joke as a developer is the happiest day is when you start a new project, and from there it's all downhill. 3 weeks later you go to a manager, it's like, oh, we have all this tech debt, and we tried out all these new frameworks, and it's all shit. We need to refactor it all, and it takes us 6 months. Right, and that's the life of a software developer, and so we got to realize that no matter whether the code was generated by AI or by humans, we constantly live at the struggle of the entropy that are our software projects, refactoring it, cleaning things up, paying down the tech debt to just have new tech debt from the latest framework or now from the latest agent.
By the way, we are in the industry, we confuse between the risks that are coming from using AI coding agents to develop code versus the risks that we introduced by adding GenAI frameworks or agent inside our code to serve our customers. Yeah. So these are two different attack surfaces. Mm-hmm. Having said that, they are intertwined, okay? Mm-hmm. Because the agent can add an AI or GenAI framework and call like an exit point to OpenAI and send PII data from my software architecture. So I'm just saying we need to differentiate between these two attack surfaces, and there are different controls mechanisms for using AI coding assistant versus controls of using AI in my code. Today, we see more and more and more, I would say, governance early in the source control manager to say, you can use only this framework from this version because this is vetted in my organization. So, or for models, for GenAI frameworks that calls a third-party service, or even developing AI agents with specific frameworks. So you have a policy on what you can add into the organization. Why? Because when you try to sell software to a customer, they ask you for a AI risk assessment. Yeah. So if you go, for example, to trust.apiiro.com, publicly available, you see that we have a risk assessment for AI because we cannot sell a deal above $1 million without having a risk assessment and showing that we have an inventory of all AI in our code, and of course that we govern and put guardrails.
Amazing that you said that. It's exactly the point that I wanted maybe to share a little practical how we did it. I call this program Trusted Apps, and I sold that internally in the organization. That wasn't easy, but thanks to the observability tools that we had, we were willing to explain what we're looking for and how to adapt the gateway, the gatekeeper. So we set up a policy based on all the things, all the top things that we want to achieve from trusted up. And we make sure we started slow and increase that. For example, zero critical for every new releases, mandatory to code review, to code owners, and much more, of course. And a part of the release, we managed to achieve a point that a gold, and we even rank it, but gold, silver, and bronze to applications and make it an internal competitors between them. So gold application will be able to run fast and move fast with attestations, and that's the most important thing that I wanted to share. Software cannot be released to production without attestations. Okay, so that won't be a gold image. That won't be application that is certified to run on production, unless you are bringing attestation that you don't have critical vulnerability in place. Under SLA, all the rest of their vulnerabilities that are in their SLA must be remediated on time. You don't have tokens, hard-coded tokens out there. You don't have, you have to get attestations of SAST with clean environment, and of course code owners, and more policies as long as, but we build a policy of blocking up to that point that was very mature, okay? So that mechanism allow us to show and demonstrate what are the gold standard and who are the stars internally, and that helped us a lot to bring that to the other teams and increase the level of the maturity.
If I'm not the moderator, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So now we published it publicly, I think, a few months ago. We saw in an organization with 7,000 developers, 62,000 repos, 10x more vulnerabilities. Even after you prioritize them with a risk-based approach, it's 8x, okay? How did this model that you were talking about, it actually breaks when you have 10x more findings and you need to ask the developers to to fix them, but then you need, like, the business needs to grow and you need to release more features faster and faster. So the physics doesn't work if you have 10x more findings on every release. So this is what we see, that the old AppSec model of the gating based on vulnerabilities or based on generic risk scoring, prioritization, CVSS score, EPSS, whatever, threat intel, it still doesn't shrink or minimize the number of vulnerabilities that I as a developer needs to fix. And with AI coding agents, it's just growing and growing and growing, because the agent can write code when we sleep, okay, or whatever.
So just to answer you, the gatekeeper is the end gate to make sure that you have trusted releases. But it's not the solution. It's like runtime versus shift left, right? Okay. That's the same. So we chose the right product that are very close to the source code and find min fix. We find the SAST, it's immediately run to the, and that goes back to find the owner and report immediately and run PR automatically. Help the developer to move fast. And yeah, we customize. I wish that there were amazing solutions out there that are really close to the shift left with no noise at all, but we needed to customize things. Yeah, indeed. So the target is to do not find it over the runtime. Of course not. We were at the very mature level to block, but that's not the solution. That's the end of the goal, to make sure that we have trusted, and it's back to the customers. I won't release untrusted software at all. I won't do that. So that's a very clear statement. By the way, top down and bottom up, everyone supported it. Everyone understand that. I didn't need to explain why we need to fix vulnerabilities. That's not an argue anymore, but we needed to find the right solutions that are really accelerate the day-to-day and close to the developer. It's a totally democratization, and it's not easy.
I was just saying, I totally understand, but it's not relevant if it's close to the code or at the latest stage. The latest stage is important because of governance and control, great, but I'm saying if the amount of code is growing, even in my IDE, and I still have this amount of vulnerabilities, is still a challenge today to ask the developers to fix this amount of vulnerabilities. I'm just saying it's unsolved
I agree.
problem.
And so, I mean, thinking about that sort of attestation towards the end,
Yeah.
was the use of sort of AI functionality within a product or use with external AI providers within a product? Was that something that those attestations also looked for? Was this this became a thing over the last year? Was that something you could also search for? Which AI providers are using? Are they suddenly using a new AI provider we weren't expecting? Is that something that was included as well?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
By the way, I do see a trend that just reminds me a bad practice from the past, where the CISOs prioritized AI security at the runtime before they do that in the development
So
practice.
fail the organization. It doesn't work this way.
I totally agree. We're preaching to the choir, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying that this is why this gentleman developed an AI firewall, and there is a demand.
I didn't develop it. All those people learned it.
Okay, Ari, and the team here. But what I'm trying to say is that we see that in AI specifically, budgets are shift or prioritized budget towards runtime AI security versus the development yeah. So we need to do a better job on educating
the board.
Yeah,
right away.
and there
Stop.
are tools today to inventory everything that you're using in your code for AI and govern it early, as you said, in the development process.
Okay, so when you talk about runtime AI security, is that sort of trying to monitor traffic as it's leaving the application or going out to an AI provider?
It's all the OWASP top 10 for AI in prompt injection and other types of attacks. It can be hallucination or data exfiltration and others. But yes, I developed an agent in my application. I'm running it now in production, and an attacker tried to exploit it. So I need protection. By the way, this is again in the risk assessment that we provide to our customers. It's from the code and runtime. We must prove an end-to-end view from code to runtime on API and AI security.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then I guess to expand the question slightly, I can't believe you mentioned this to me, but we talked about it in engineering up until now. But how do you deal with the risk of your marketing team going and spinning up a website with Lord alone knows what personal information about people in base 44 or something? Like how does visibility and how does control come into that? I
literally had a call with the CISO today on this topic. It's a huge challenge, and they can onboard to base 44 by themselves. They don't need an approval from the CISO, and they can run it, and they can connect base to an Excel spreadsheet that has all the PII, personal information, identified information of these customers, of their customers. It's a big problem. I don't think that it's like per se application security problem.
It's product security.
It's you need to have a visibility to which solutions and services and SaaS providers you use, and then make sure that it's a data problem that you need to make sure that you do not provide sensitive data to this vibe coding tools.
I don't love the question because you're using the word prevent the marketing team from doing something. I actually think that is one of the protect is the better word. Because how amazing is it that anyone in a company, whether they're in marketing, they're in product management, design, comms, HR, legal, finance, and of course engineers, can now use AI tools to build software themselves. Like we have so long talked about democratization in roles, in countries around the world, depending on your educational background or not, right? That now you can, in almost any human language, start building a marketing web page. Yes. And so I think that we should acknowledge that that's an amazing thing, and I actually believe that the roles between product management, engineering, design will collapse much more than they have before. This will no longer be the silo where the PM writes a spec and the designer builds a Figma and the engineer builds code. They're all going to be building together, and they have specializations in each direction of the Venn diagram, but in the middle is much bigger. And so we have to think about protection. And the answers are actually not that different from probably your OWASP meetup 5 years ago, which is we got to skill people. We got to tell them about the OWASP top 10 and the risk and how to manage data within GDPR and what have you. And we have to give them the right tools and the right platforms, and we have to treat a marketing employee with the same decency as an engineer, which is like, you are a grown-up employee of our company, and we expect you to follow the processes and the policies, but we also allow you to contribute to the value of the company. I think that is crucial in the mindset that in the shift that AI is going to bring to our companies. There is no longer all these silos where marketing is not allowed to ship software. Yes, they should be, as long as they're following the same processes and go through the same trainings and so on.
So you see an executive that wants to see business velocity, business growth, but I would just say that on the other hand, I would encourage these SaaS providers like Base to embed security inside the product by design for every prompt. And unfortunately, they are able to grow faster than their time that they need to invest to secure the prompt and the code and all this. So it needs to come from the customer saying, yes, I'm buying, but show me that it will be secured. And it's hard, hard to implement.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of it. And I think the other part of it, which is sort of why this question is a bit tricky in the first place, I think if you, this is sort of an evergreen truth, but I think it's even more relevant now that, if it's security, we're sort of trying to put more blockers in place, and more sort of gates in place, and more sort of slow down, then that's the thing that's going to make people want to use an external platform to begin with. If the processes, I guess, are to help and to assist and to support, then people aren't hiding under the table every time security are coming in. I think then it's more likely that either they're going to use a platform that's sort of within your area of knowledge, or alternatively they're going to come to a security team and involve the security team. That does kind of bring us into the next question, which is around... By
the way, sorry, before you move on, until the breach in Base 44, when it will happen, they will invest resources to secure their platform. So
we wait until the breach and then we tell people to use it. That's
we see other platforms like that, like Salesforce.
Yeah.
I'm just sharing...
Huge
a lot of nights I spent with the Salesforce issue, but we see platforms like Base, but platforms, I'm not saying like specific SaaS solutions, but platforms that truly making a huge difference in the companies. They will have to invest in security by design, and we saw what happened to Salesforce after Salesloft breach and several other vulnerabilities and huge attacks. So they're going to do that. They're going to invest in that for better or for worse, but they will do that.
I think certainly we're hoping to see more of that. I guess we don't see as much of it as we'd like, and not as much of it with organizations that haven't been breached yet as well.
Because CISOs and application security teams and product security teams, they cannot think about all the features, all the use cases, and develop it by their own. It's mass. So it's really an expertise by those solutions.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess So the next thing I wanted to talk about was around where do you see AppSec teams adapt? How you've seen them adapt over the last year or so? Sort of how to keep up with this sort of pace of development, and again try and avoid being blockers, but work alongside, run alongside development teams. What good examples have you seen of that over the last year or so?
Wow, I get two microphones now. I would say that what we've seen in our organization is, I'm going to go back to your your happy days of, oh, I'm a new developer and it's 3 weeks in and I've got all this tech debt. Well, if you can imagine Akamai and its foundation in regards to our content delivery network, and you think about some of the legacy architectures that we've had, and you think about some of the additional acquisitions that we've made in regards to additional platforms and the complexities that brought, we see this as a huge game changer in regards to allowing us to take these disparate tech stacks and really come to a common ground, going back to your point of, I don't need to have been here for 25 years to understand all the complexities in this tech stack. I now have a democratized capability that allows me to pull together and leverage all of these, what used to be disparate assets, and now bring them together to enhance security. So I think that's really the game changer that we're seeing. The other thing I would say, going back to the original question, let's not sugarcoat or forget history. There's going to be breaches all day long. So I don't know if you remember, like 15 years ago when you got your first breach notification because your healthcare provider decided to outsource the processing payment. The next thing you knew, every day, every month, you got another letter from somebody else. Just because we're using AI doesn't mean that we're not going to have those same risk situations from a breach. Furthermore, the reason why organizations choose to actually utilize third-party SaaS providers is a risk conversation and is a scenario where they actually defer the risk from themselves in certain areas of their business to a third party. So we'll continue to see a rise in breaches forever. I don't think that that's going to change.
Yeah, but I think that the velocity of the breaches that we will see in the next year or so will increase, because when we measure the amount of APIs in code that are being developed, when we measure the open source dependencies, when we measure the amount of new technologies that are being adopted in the code bases across all of our customers, it's growing in numbers that you can, as a human, you cannot handle and map the attack surface and assess the risk of these components that are introduced, and eventually it will come to production without review, and then you have, like, we're so many years in security, you have defense in depth. So you have a layer on the development side that protect. You have a layer at the runtime, and you do more, pen testing or other stuff to identify. But I do think that we will see an increase in the attack in the wild because of this expansion of the development velocity. But sometimes we're saying development velocity as a generic title without actually understanding what does it mean. It's not just the lines of code, okay? It's entry point to your application that an attacker can exploit. So if the number of entries is growing, then you have a bigger attack surface, and you don't even know it, as we said earlier, because the developers themselves doesn't understand the software architecture.
So any other, we need to wrap it up in a sec, but just like any other good examples you've seen, or sort of ways you've seen AppSec teams sort of work well to deal with this acceleration?
As the one that didn't sleep for the last 10 years because of that and other vulnerabilities, I want to bring some optimistic side here. I think it's an amazing opportunity for AppSec's team to be able to put your knowledge, your expertise into agent. Don't be afraid of it. It won't replace you so fast. Put your knowledge, your expertise, the things that you know the most, the best from everyone that is sitting here. I'm sure that he can put his knowledge over agent and slowly create tools that will help you and bring value to the company. I think that's what we're going to see. Revolution. Not everything will be replaced by us, but we will extend the agents. They will be our superpower. So I'm very optimistic. I'm seeing a lot of early stage startups that are coming to that point and trying to solve features. Okay, it will be features soon. And we're going to see a lot of acquisitions, very interesting cybersecurity acquisitions in Israel that are really want to help us to make our life easier.
I will also be an optimistic for a second, and and I would say that AI created an opportunity for prevention and use all the knowledge that we have as an AppSec engineers to help or guard the agents, the AI coding agents, guard them from generating non-compliant and vulnerable code. And I think this will be the next wave of AppSec. Good luck to all of us protecting our applications.
There's some final thoughts from Thomas.
Yeah, Thomas.
I mean, I think I already said most of the things. Optimism has fallen a lot. I think, if you look into bigger organizations, the challenges that the AppSec teams often have is that they're seen as the police and bureaucrats. Or, in the US we would say the DMV, it's where you go wait for hours to get your driver's license renewed. And that's what we don't want, right? Like, we don't want a part of our organization to be seen as the the people that slow everybody down. Right. And so it's crucial, for AppSec teams, as for many other roles, to think about how can AI make their processes faster. Like, we all live under the problem of having way too much work, right? Like, raise your hand if your backlog is empty, right? Like, or if you have no ideas anymore what to put into the icebox or the new idea backlog or list or whatever. And the same is true for AppSec. There's always more work than we can achieve. And so the question really is, how can I leverage AI to make my life easier? Or how can I leverage AI to make my customers' lives, which is often an internal team, easier to interact with me? Maybe, I build an internal bot, that has all the AppSec knowledge in Markdown files, so I don't have to answer the questions in Slack channels. People can self-serve these questions. Maybe it can, start the process of engaging with AppSec through a GitHub pull request where AI helps me to write the pull request, so I don't have to sit in an hour-long meeting to fill out some spreadsheet or what have you. And I think this is where AI can help us beyond just, fixing vulnerabilities and OWASP checklists and all these kind of things. A lot of what slows big companies down is all the bureaucracy, all the meetings you're sitting in, the 7 pages you have to write. And small companies don't have that until they do, right? And as such, I think that's often the overlooked part of how AI can help us. It's these little tools and the little processes that bring us back to having joy in working for our companies. And look, software engineering is not a production job. It's a creative job, right? Like, that's what makes it so hard. That's why all our projects are always late, right? Because with Agile and all the Scrum and all that, we still haven't figured out how to actually measure and estimate how long work takes. And AI hasn't actually changed that either. It maybe now you're spending more time figuring out the problem than figuring out the code, but you still don't know when you're done with your day. And as such, let's bring the joy back into AppSec, into software development, and see AI not as this bad thing that replaces our jobs, but as this thing that actually brings the joy back into the jobs, the joy that we had as 15-year-old or 20-year-old or 25-year-old whenever we learn coding, bring that joy back into our day-to-day. That's, I think, where my head is every single day, and like, how can I make my job as joyful as possible?
Fantastic.
Totally agree with that. And one idea following to that is think about how you can give self-service to developers, not just bring more work, but also think about self-service, how you can give them an agent that will accelerate their job. So, because it's mutual responsibility. So. Yeah.
All right, fantastic. We're going to leave it there for now. Thank you very much to our panelists. Please round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Moran. Stick around. We've got an update coming.